Hi, my name is Zak Nordyke, and I'm the director of a high school program for adults aged 22 and older in Ohio. It's a really distinct privilege to be a part of such an innovative program, and I'd like to share some of what we've been able to do at the high school that I work with for adults. But I'd also like to share some ideas that I think transcend just the state of Ohio and could be adopted nationally, and um, I think generate some pretty profound results. So I'm going to start off, and I do have a presentation. I'm going to start off by laying a little bit of groundwork for what we do and how we've been able to affect so many adults that are 22 and older, and we have no upper age threshold in Ohio. But I want to give a little foundation to, I think, why we've been so successful, and just kind of start off with saying how many people's lives we've been able to affect. So we're going into now the fifth school year in Ohio where there's been kind of a specified program for adults that have kind of aged out of the traditional K through 12 system. So in these 5 years, it's been a lot of learning, a lot of evolution, as would be expected. But we're now getting, I think, a really incredible formula that's impactful. It's very performance focused, but the performance focus is on things that have tangible impact on the lives of the learners that we're affecting. And I think equally as important, it's beginning to have a generational impact because the adults obviously are the heads of household, but trickling down kind of the generational pipeline, the children and the children's children are going to get immensely affected by the choice that the adult has made to finish their secondary education. So with that said, let me just give kind of this basic information. My program alone has been able to help roughly 1,000 adults finish their secondary education and earn a high school diploma, not a GED, but a high school diploma from a place called Dohn Community High School in Cincinnati, Ohio. So and we're going into our fifth school year offering this. Over the last 4 years, that's been accomplished. And it's been a lot of learning, a lot of levels of learning each year to get to those heights. Was not an overnight process. But the presentation I'm going to share with you today talks about how we've been able to affect those 1,000 folks, and did we only have 1,000 people, and did all 1,000 of them graduate? Of course not. We've had many more thousands come in and start the process and not fully complete. But at the end of the day, there's a very systematic way that I think we've been able to achieve great results, sustain and build upon those results each year. So let me go ahead and share my screen. And I'd love to take you through our talk, or my talk here, on the powers of competency-based, on-demand, independent learning for adult learners. And I don't think it's just about finishing high school. In the case that we've been running it, obviously it's focused on the secondary level, but I think it can work equally as well for post-high school career training, as well as post-secondary, so college level work. The whole idea is, I think when we describe the learners that we're impacting, there's some real commonalities in life circumstance that are unfortunately not addressed really well, in my opinion. So this presentation, I think, talks a lot about where the students are at presently from a life circumstances standpoint, and how to maybe best address those needs from kind of an academic structuring standpoint, or just kind of a program structuring standpoint. We've got to meet our clients, our students, anybody that we're working with, I think, where they're at. And if we do not do that, then we are failing to serve them at the highest capacity. So without further ado, let's get into the presentation. So I'm going to share my screen here. Um, the presentation, I've titled it 22 plus just because that's who we work with, but it can be any real adult learner. I think some states may start as low as 16 years old. I don't think some of this presentation would be as relevant um, for a 16-year-old, but definitely when individuals are 22 years old or older, we need to really take into deep consideration their motivation and their life circumstance. Um, Before I dive deep into this presentation, let's ponder this a moment, okay? When you're in the traditional K through 12 system, there's usually a legal obligation on the parents of a child to send them to school for a certain amount of time and a certain length of years. After that time, that's no longer a legal requirement, it's a choice. Okay, so whether a younger person likes school or not, there's some type of legal requirement in place. There's usually a truancy officer, there's family pressure, there's a myriad of reasons to go to school that aren't self-selected ones. With adults, that's completely different. Adults, especially 22 years and older, have self-selected coming back to school. There's no obligation for them to do this. And, coming back to college, I think most people find like, yes, that's to improve career perspectives. But boy, what if you have to come back to school and finish off your secondary education? That tends to come with, the same, I think, long-term goal, getting a better career. But there's a lot of embarrassment with that because usually you're 18 or 19 years old when you're finishing high school, and the folks in our program are on average 35 years old. So there's a whole lot of challenge usually that took place during their kind of original time in school that has to be respected, and it has to be understood that their typical motivation is that they've plateaued in their present job pathway. They realize it's important. They tend to be the heads of household, making the bulk of the income for their family. I've got to do something more with my life. I've got to do something more for my family. I'm telling my children, go to school. But I myself have not finished even high school. I don't want to be a hypocrite. I want to be a better provider. These are profound reasons that, again, in my view, are a lot more substantial than, I got to go to school because if I don't, I'll get in trouble. I get the rationale for the younger students, and we need to have those things in place. But we need to also understand adults going to finish secondary or post-secondary education, for that matter, their motivations and the things that govern their experience have to be totally different, or at least different and considered than your standard 9 through 12 or K through 12 student. These are two different demographics. Now, when we're thinking about an adult that is not going to be threatened, that there's some legal consequence for not coming to school, and we realize, hey, they want a better life for their family, they want to be a better role model for their children, then we can start thinking of structures that make sense for their lives. Okay, so that's part one. Now I'm going to dive into a little bit of how we do things. My program that I operate is a roughly 13 team members, 14 including myself, and we are competency-based, we are self-paced, and actually we are also paper-based. Our team uses a lot of technology, but our learners tend to learn best still with paper pencil. Do not get me wrong. I am a big proponent of technology. I realize that that is omnipresent throughout almost every known career path, that you have to be great with technology. I understand that, but these adults that we serve tend to have a lot of challenge with technology at first. And if that's kind of the only option, and we do have a technology pathway where students can learn online, but if that's the only option, that can be a deterrent and a barrier to even getting started. We want to eliminate as many barriers to getting started as possible. So again, we are competency-based, we are continuously enrolling, we are also paper-based, and things can happen on demand because we do have a web program too for those that a coming to school option is not the best. And I'm going to talk more in the presentation about coming to school isn't what we typically think about when we're coming to a physical location to learn. It's different. I don't think it's, unheard of how we do things, but I certainly don't think it's done frequently enough, certainly for the population that we're serving, which is highly motivated adults that do have family lives and other obligations. So I'll be really excited to share that as well. But I want to talk about our enrollment process because things get started early. To either win an adult's trust or lose it can happen during an enrollment process. And anyone that does adult education is aware of this. The more barriers removed, the more trust that can be built quickly, and the more positive, underscore positive, the more positive and thoughtful immediate gratification you can give to that adult, the better. We're not talking about if there's a line of 20 people and whoever storms to the front because they need gratification that moment succeeds. We're talking about having processes in place that allow the adult to feel like they're making positive progress towards completing their secondary education as quickly but thoughtfully as possible. Their trust comes from that you're going to be organized and have efficient processes in place that get them started quickly and relevantly. And that's our enrollment, okay? So the state of Ohio, there's certain documents that we have to collect from our students that allow them to come into our program. And we've done a good job, I think, being very consistent in what those documents are. And as adults call us to want to join our program, our team members that answer the phones are consistently preaching what documents need to be brought in. So when learners come in to enroll, they're prepared with those documents. And I won't get into what the actual paperwork is that they need to bring, but there's, a number of things that need to be brought in. So we know that the preparation for enrollment usually starts with an initial phone call or an initial email or a social media direct message or whatever medium a student's communicating through. We need to preach to them what they need to do when they come to enroll. So that time's used very effectively. Okay, so the student brings in these mandatory docs. And again, we've given them, if we've had the opportunity to communicate with them before they enroll, we've given them the information that they need to bring, okay? When the student comes in, they give those docs to one of our team members, copies are made, things are stored, the documents are handed back to the student, and they fill out 3 simple pages of enrollment information, okay? That's it. We don't try to go any further than the mandatory information that the state needs us to collect and things that will be helpful for us to know about the student so we can start giving them the best plan and learning environment possible. Don't collect any more information than is required by state, regulation, or that you feel will be relevant in an initial sit down to discuss with the student. That's been our mantra. Don't overwhelm the student. It's about them seeing progress day one, not having to wait and wait and wait to feel like they're making any headway towards their ultimate goal of getting back into school and then, of course, long-term, getting a better career for themselves, okay? The next phase, after the students handed these mandatory documents in, we've copied and given them back the originals, they take a reading and math evaluation. I realize some states and some programs will be obligated to give a TABE test or a MAP test, or, run down the gamut of all the tests that exist to measure what grade level someone's on, or just somehow take a baseline of where someone is academically. I get those rules and regulations well. We certainly like to know or have a good feel, especially about how well someone can read, because that's pivotal to any of our programs. I'm certain that someone has a baseline ability to read, okay? But what, again, we don't want, and again, I sympathize for those that have kind of arduous testing requirements. We have to somehow, some way, make getting that baseline not a superfluous, painful process. That can be a big deterrent. Most of the students are pretty keenly aware of any academic deficiencies they have, and it doesn't need to be a 3-hour process to prove or disprove to them how much or how little they know. We just need to gather enough that we know this is where you're at, and this is how we need to help you. If that is a major process, you're again making your process for them to do what they want, join your program, get a better career for themselves, further their education, much more difficult. We use something called the Calvert. It's typically used to show high school readiness. And our learners are on a 5th, 6th, 7th grade level on reading and math usually, okay? I don't think that should come as a surprise to many, but we get that information in 45, 50 minutes. We're able to know how well, roughly, a student can read and how well they, are as a mathematician. We don't spend a tremendous amount of time gathering a baseline. We're going to quickly do that and get the student, expeditiously moved into something that's more pertinent than just an initial baseline, because that's what it is. An initial baseline. You'll get to know the student more as they move through coursework and other things that you have for them. The next thing that we do is we have a student fill out a form that shows us how much they've worked, okay, or volunteered. Getting a student's work history, depending on what your state allows or what's important, could vary in degree of importance. In Ohio, it's incredibly important. Our career tech elective form that students fill out that show us how many years they've worked, where they've worked, what they've done in terms of task at work, that all counts as elective credits, not content credits, but elective credits. The years our adults have put in the workforce have taught them something. Let's think about an adult that only went, and completed the 8th grade, but's never been to high school. If they've been in the workforce, it's not like they stopped learning after 8th grade. They just stopped traditionally learning in a classroom setting. And I have to credit Ohio for having the foresight to reward people for that experiential, that practical learning. That's huge. And I can't tell you how many people burst into tears, not of frustration, but of joy, when they kind of apprehensively tell us, I'm so embarrassed. I didn't do any high school. I never went to 9th grade. I never went, when I was done with 8th grade, things happened and I couldn't continue. And we just ask them, but you've been working for, years, I'm sure, right? And they say, yes. Why does that matter? We say, well, because you did learn something during those years of work. And they say, really? No one's ever told me I'm smart. I know that this kind of but this happens. And it's, that should catch us all off guard. Like, boy, I think of all the time someone's told me, boy, you're smart, and how great that feels. And no one's ever done that for them. But we only have that breakthrough conversation because we're telling them, hey, your experience in the workforce has taught you something, and we can actually give you credit. And they were coming in thinking, I'm going to have to do all this work and I haven't learned a thing and they're going to think I'm this. And we get to tell them just the opposite news. You learned something. You've learned a lot in your life. You've made it this many years with an 8th grade education, or at least in our eyes, an 8th grade education. Obviously, you've learned a lot more. We're going to reward you with credit, elective credit for that. And that's just really powerful, especially for learners that were unable to pick up any credits or very few credits. It's just so satisfying. And you just see it in their body language when you're telling them that their work experience counted for something. So we collect the mandatory documents. We do the baseline testing for reading and math, and we gather information on their work experience. This whole process takes roughly 90 minutes. Listen, that is a really great usage of 90 minutes. The student really starts to build trust when we give them, kind of when we're telling them about the work experience, and when they do this small amount of paperwork, bring the docs in, complete the learning evals, they're almost like, is this it? This is all I have to do. Yeah, that's all you had to do. And we have a conversation with them, and we can make them what's called a bridge plan or a checklist. A bridge plan is if they were unable to bring us a high school transcript, which we used as kind of a baseline for how many credits they have. If they bring us that, then we can make them a full plan. But if they don't, we want them to start right away. That's important. 90 minutes in, we're telling them, you're about to start today. And they're a little bit scared, like, whoa, I was just planning on enrolling. That's what you usually think of processes. Arduous, long form, many appointments to get going. No, we want to build processes, and I think this is important for all of us in this space to think about, where starting something isn't as hard as doing your first algebra assignment. That's ludicrous. That's poor operations, in my thought. How do we do away with this? How do we, in 90 minutes, maybe 2 hours, get somebody in our program and working? How do you do your equivalent of a bridge plan, meaning if they didn't bring a transcript or whatever maybe paperwork that they need to get started, how can you have a quick conversation with them? How can you assess that paperwork that they've done for you, hopefully keeping that short, and get them started on an assignment that day, that moment? How can they go home with something to study that moves them forward in their high school completion process? That question will be answered differently depending on your program structure. But try to find an answer to it. It's important. That's how we've affected thousands of lives. Even for the students who've not finished our program, they've been tremendous advocates of our program because they respect our efficiency level. They respect that we understand they've got important responsibilities outside of school, and forcing them to go through a multi-day, arduous enrollment process is counterproductive to their entire life, and it's disrespectful to how much they're already taken care of between work and their children and other obligations that we all have in life. And I'm only stating this emphatically because I see all too often programs getting a rise, or maybe just not putting enough thought into, we need to be student-centered. We need to be student-centric. We need to think of the students' real lives and take away and strip as much bureaucracy and red tape from allowing them to get started as possible. How do we get an assignment in their hands within the first 90 minutes to 2 hours of meeting them? And it doesn't need to be anything prolific, but we need to share with them, things in your life have been tough, but we want you to get started on this pathway quickly. And we really care and understand more about your life, in a way that we're going to be there for you or with you. We're partners in this journey. I think the more you can strip away restriction without being too loose, you don't want to spend a lot of time, I think, doing things that are too sympathetic or breaking rules. But if your rules are in place to make that intake process quick and getting that first assignment in someone's hands a breeze, you've shown them that you're out, I think, to serve them in their best interest. Okay. That said, data tracking, collaboration, being highly organized is essential. In my view, customer service or student service isn't just about a courteous tone and being polite. That's certainly first and foremost. Treating people with respect and being courteous and being prompt, I think it goes without saying, but I'm going to say it anyway, that's a must. Being deeply respectful of students' challenges is a must. Being empathetic, to the degree that's reasonable is certainly a must. And that's all part of building a positive student culture that you need to be successful. But going hand in hand with that, I think, is optimizing your usage of data, being highly organized, storing things in a manner that allow folks on the team to collaborate and be prompt in serving students. I can tell you, as being as nice and courteous as possible to students is wonderful. But if you are nice and courteous to students and you misplace their information, or you don't know where they're at in the course of their completing your program, they're only going to tolerate so much, as should be expected. Students need to know that you're organized. Students need to know that you're using great technology to collaborate. And it's not that they care about what the technology is, but we track all of our things using the Google Suite. We want every person on our team to have private, secure access to relevant information that helps that student or that helps the staff know where that student is in their process, know exactly what needs to be done next, communicating key information in real time that allows our team to have the best view of where that student is now, both maybe in life things as well as school things. And having an individual plan in place that will guide that student from where they're at presently all the way through a diploma. And I'll talk later in the presentation about even things that we're doing post-diploma. But again, organization as well as being courteous and respectful go hand in hand to deliver an ideal student experience. And I'm a big proponent that even if you're using paper pencil or paper pen for your students, from an organization standpoint, you've got to leverage the best technology available to collaborate as a team to deliver the most real-time and pertinent information to one another to serve your students in an optimal way. Losing information, not being prompt because of poor technology, I think will always lead students to believe that they're not being served the best, and they'll be apprehensive to tell others to see or to join your program. They'll be apprehensive to trust that everything you're saying is correct, even if you have great intentions, because you've proven maybe not to have the organization and trustworthiness to be vulnerable. So don't think that this is an ice cold usage of technology just to be flashy. I think it's a pertinent and mandatory component of delivering the best possible student service and environment. An individualization, and just to end this, and having individual plans that guide how each learner will go through your program, where they can see a defined beginning and end to the process, is important. We know this. Without a map, how the heck do we know where we're going in life? These students frequently in their lives have not had strong direction and great folks to guide them. The stronger the direction and more guidance we can give them, the more assuredness they have in our programs. This is where we start to get really unique. I talked about an individual program, but boy, how do you implement this, especially if you have hundreds, if not thousands of learners learning in your program? Well, it's redesigning and rethinking about the traditional classroom experience. And some people, a learning lab is nothing new. And that's kind of what we've got set up. So our classroom experience, and this is just us, we have evening programs as well, but the core of our students come in from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. and we are just open Monday through Friday. But our students come into a learning laboratory style environment. Just the way we have things set up, our classrooms have usually 2 teachers, sometimes more, but those 2 teachers are very good at a multitude of subjects. They're not there to espouse knowledge on a whiteboard or lecture. They're there to make critical breakthroughs, to tutor, to guide, to coach, to do what it takes for the learner to become a great independent learner. And that's a skill. Researching is a skill. Studying is a skill. Our staff usually has very good knowledge of the English, social studies, the humanities. One person that would be in the learning laboratory, or 2 people, would have that type of knowledge. That would be in this, think of it as one big classroom. And then there would be 1 to 2 other people on average that have a strong math, science, logic background. From 8 to 3, we're going to see, and we do not know when the students are coming in within that time, so we're certainly not on a block schedule where when our students show up at 8 a.m., let's say, that's not the math bell, and if you're there for another subject, oh boy, you're out of luck, wait till that bell. No. We have really intelligent, great people that are excellent at various subjects. Our students then have an individual plan, and they're working on study guides. Those study guides then prepare them for a final assignment at some point when they're ready. When a student's working on their study guide, basically a packet of information that helps them prepare to recover an English credit or a science credit or a math credit or a social studies credit or whatever, all the subject areas. When a student brings that packet of information in and their plan showing what they've got to do, our staff steps in and they can help them with whatever the learner would be stuck on. Our learners are continuously being asked by our team, do you need any help? Our team's not always, but kind of looking at what they're doing and making sure like they're kind of eavesdropping in an appropriate way. Oh, I see, you've been working on that for quite a while. Can I give you some insight? Our team is there to help our students make critical breakthroughs, to show them the best way to research things, to show them the best way to look at things that they're having challenge with. So from 8 to 3, we have learners coming in different waves at different times, working on all different subject areas concurrently. In a room, we might have 15 students over the course of 2 hours, and each of those 15 students is working on a subject that's totally different than the other student. You can have an American person working on an American history study guide, another person working on an applied algebra study guide, another person working on an English 10 study guide, somebody else taking the credit test for financial math. This all has to be orchestrated simultaneously. It's only through having great staff in this kind of learning lab environment that we can serve people when they have time to put their energy and effort into their education. We ask that the students come in at least once a week. On average, our students come in 2 times per week for about 2.5 hours per visit. They are able to get a heck of a lot done then. But the beauty of being open from 8 to 3 and allowing students to self-select when they show is this. Students have jobs, very typically. Their schedule isn't always the same. Sometimes they've got to work the entire day to pay bills. Also, many of our students have families. Childcare for them, unfortunately, is not always predictable. It's extremely key that if somebody can't watch their kids, they'd be able to take the time to do that. If we had a set schedule, it would never align with the hundreds or the thousands of people over the history of our program that we've been able to serve. They would have been out of luck if we would have had a stagnant schedule that forced them to show up to class during certain times to get certain things done. Because the state of Ohio has done something else innovative, and hopefully more states adopt this. This isn't a seat time model, and this isn't an average daily attendance model. This is a model that is a pay-for-performance model where when a student recovers credit, when a student passes, if this is part of their plan, when a student passes a state standardized test, when a student graduates, our program receives funding. If we have a student come in for 100 days and, hundreds of hours, that's great. But what have they done? What are they getting done? That's where the value for us, how we stay fiscally sustainable, it's on production. And that aligns extremely well with building the flexibility that is necessary to serve learners where they're at. They've got busy lives. They've got much to do. For us to, I think, say in a culture where television is basically on demand, and I know this is something different, but if I can watch what I want on Netflix at any time, and I no longer have to dash to my TV set at a set time, that's where also industry is moving. We're still, most schools still, I should say, are on an industrial pattern. We live in an information age and beyond. On demand is common. It's the norm. For us to build systems that are not on demand and fluid and able to reach learners at times that make sense for their lives, especially adults, maybe not K through 12 folks. I get the challenge with that. But when you are the head of household, when you are the big income person, and it's either school or paying that bill or keeping your benefits for your child's health, you best believe that that learner is going to choose to keep their household going. And who could blame them? And why would we think, if it's possible with the guidelines that are in place, why would we be audacious to think they're skipping our program? No, they're not. They're not. They're living their life as an adult, and they're doing something relevant for their household that sustains them. Education is important, but we must keep in mind flexibility is equally as important for this group, this demographic. And I'm passionate about this because I feel like we write a lot of individuals off as not wanting it, not gritty enough, a lot of book terminology. When it's we're doing a poor job of serving them where they're at, what their lives need. We've got to break away from this, and we've got to build systems that embrace this versus reject it or question it. This isn't as good as if we were in front of that person for 3 hours a day. That's to be determined, and I think I'm going to share with you in this presentation how we can not dismiss that. I think we always have to keep our mind open to, is this the best education? Is this getting the best results? It's fine, but we have to have some results to compare. And we have to be open to new solutions that are built for an information age and beyond, an artificial intelligence age and beyond, just where we're at now. Not everybody's going to be a 9-to-5 factory person. And that's terrific if they are. But we need to make solutions that fit people's lives as they presently are constructed. One other thing is for people that just have crazy, crazy, crazy schedules, we didn't think it was going to be possible to do an online program. A lot of our learners seem to struggle greatly with technology, but they are the folks that we serve, at least the adults that we have the pleasure of partnering with, they're excellent with their thumbs. And what the heck do I mean by that? If you can get your materials that you need to use, your study materials, your testing materials, if you can get those online in a format that can be used on a tablet or a mobile phone, I think a lot of folks will know where I'm coming from on this point. Most people are a little bit intimidated, or a lot of bit intimidated, by a keyboard, a desktop, a laptop. That's foreign. A lot of folks didn't grow up with that. They've not been taught how to use it. It's overwhelming. It's just become the cultural norm for almost everyone to have a smartphone, a mobile device that has a nice thumb, you can type with your thumbs, keypad, and most people aren't feeling overwhelmed or like it's a daunting task to use that. So we have made sure that all the things that we put online can be viewed pretty easily, meaning read online, that there's rich video content that corresponds with it that can be played, I'm sorry, I'm not online, but yes, online, but on a mobile device, tablet or mobile phone. And I wouldn't do this, but that there's an ability, if needed, if the student's doing a written response, that you can have some select short form responses where it's mobile friendly and they can use their thumbs to respond. Obviously, multiple choice, it's a no-brainer. That's easy. But yes, I know it sounds insane. Allowing somebody to do a written response on their mobile device is huge. And we've been able to get 50-year-old individuals that definitely don't have a lot of experience with technology through, a really strong amount of coursework. And some do it exclusively on a mobile device. And I'm not always talking about a tiny cell phone. Sometimes it's a tablet or a tablet with a little keyboard. There's things. But what I'm saying, we've got to meet, this just all goes to this overarching point of we've got to meet learners where they're at. And we try to do this through our learning lab and our flexibility and our competency-based learning. Okay, students progress, or student course progression. If a student's learning with us in person, when they take a test, we use a tool called ZipGrade to grade it. Why do I even bring this up? Why am I even saying ZipGrade and talking about this? Well, I'm going to share with you why. When a student finishes something, we want to spend the maximum time talking about what they did right or what they need to improve on, and we want to spend the minimum amount of time grading. Or checking off if things are right or wrong. This ZipGrade tool is literally an app that can be put on our staff smartphones. And when that staff member snapshots what the adult learner's done on their test, within less than a second, we know exactly what they've scored. So we spend very little time grading, and we spend a whole heck of a lot of time engaging with the student, making sure that they're well aware of what they've why they got what they got right and what they need to work on gets worked on. We always are thinking about that. And the reason I bring the ZipGrade up is because it's a tool that allows us to maximize our time being student-centric versus minimizing our time doing manual analog tedium. It's important. How do we maximize our time with learners? How do we remove tedium? How do we remove minutiae that is a barrier to building a great relationship with folks? Things that certainly are worth pondering. Our test results are immediately added in. This is when a student passes the credit recovery test. They're immediately added into a Google Sheet. That sheet is a collaborative tool that everyone on our team can see and share. So when a student asks, what more do I need to do? The answer is instantaneous. Again, rapport, trust, positive, thoughtful, immediate gratification. Not the immediate gratification of pushing first to line, but the immediate gratification of them knowing, the student, that we as a team know where they're at, we're organized, and we're tracking it. We're not going to lose it. It's a joint venture here. That's important. Overall progress is tracked in our state web portal. So we take that information and we have to make sure that our state, we basically have someone auditing all of our plans. We have to make sure that we have someone at the Ohio Department of Education in our circumstance that's looked at the plan that we made for the student, the individual plan, and they agree these are the credits that this individual needs to recover in order to complete high school. We're being perpetually audited. But as the student then completes those requirements, we send them to the state, and that's kind of digitally checked off. Oh, that learner's done that. We have to show them proof via transcript that those courses that we've mutually agreed on have been completed. There's accountability in everything that we do. Our state requires us that 40%, and our learners have two fiscal years to complete our program. But our state requires for 40% of the planned coursework that student needs be completed each year. Obviously, the student needs to have 100% of the coursework that you've mutually agreed upon with the state and your program. That all needs to be done over those 2 years, but 40% per year at least. Additionally, 40% of the people that go into your program need to finish. And some may say that's a low bar, that's a high bar. I can tell you we're far exceeding that. You know, we're up 60, 70% on that. And that's what we're most proud about. The coursework completion's wonderful, but we're being looked at and evaluated on each plan, on each learner's progress. We do not get funding for sitting a learner in class. We get funding for getting results for learners. This has to be a very common practice, I think, nationwide. We have to have tangible reasons to be innovative. We have to have tangible incentives for learners to get the best possible results as program providers. We can't allow systems to exist that make no sense for an adult learner, where they need to sacrifice going to work or taking care of their children to show up to our programs. We need flexibility that's predicated on performance and doing things that ultimately impact our various states' economies by making a better workforce, helping those students become more productive in our state's economies. It's mission critical that we think about building structures that allow this to happen within the typical life structures that our students have. And now we're getting into the nitty-gritty. I believe this is the last slide. Diploma and beyond. We've talked about competency-based. We've talked about pay for performance. But we haven't talked about, or I've not shared much about, is a diploma enough? Does that really move the needle? What's the benefit? Why would a state ever allocate any funding for an alternative pathway? Isn't GED high set task good enough? Isn't there another program that's vastly better? I want to say that there's many things that we should add into our ecosystem, but we must hear this part. All of these ultimately come down to a financial decision for states. What is the ROI? What's the return on investment as a state if we choose to fund this? What bucket of funding, because that always seems to be tight, what bucket of funding do we pull from? What bucket of funding do we pull from that allows any of this to materialize? This all sounds great, but how in the world do we do this? I think it's in this section where we can think about some of the basic foundation of how you can make this materialize in your state if you don't have something like this. We have to think beyond the diploma. Ohio has a diploma program that focuses on getting a career certification. Ohio has a program that I've talked quite a bit about that focuses on recovering credit. Both result in a high school diploma, but I believe the merger of a career certification, a diploma, and getting a job has to be a responsibility that we fuse together and put on a group that's providing adult education, or somehow tangibly tracking that adult you're educating has moved on to legitimate post-secondary education and at some point make an ROI that's even more profound for your state's economy. I touch on this so heavily because we're not putting out money for feel-good stories only. And I think that there is certainly a place for feel-good stories. Our states are putting money out because we don't want individuals to forever be stuck in low-wage jobs that have no upward mobility. That's ultimately what the diplomas starting to move them towards. Ultimately, companies and enterprises in our state need team members that can be counted on, and that as employers, they believe they should have a certain baseline level of knowledge. We have to be able to deliver those. That's what we're educating these adults to do. Or maybe we're going to have some select folks that are entrepreneurs. We at least equip them with the common sense to start down that pathway. But again, all this revolves back to how do we positively impact each of our state economies? This is where we really have to start some thinking. And again, some people will debate this. This could be a potentially controversial thought, but needless to say, I think it needs to be considered. What if, as adult education providers, we put on a couple different hats? One, as a provider that's capable of delivering an education such as a credit recovery model, as I've discussed, that has the flexibility that I've talked about for adults that have aged out of our K through 12 systems. Thinking about delivering that education in a flexible capacity, as I've mentioned many, many, many times throughout the presentation, is important. That's one layer. It gets them that nice piece of paper. They've got a diploma now. That's terrific. That raises, on average in Ohio at least, that learner's ability to earn income by $10,000 per year on average. So the difference between someone who didn't complete high school and someone who completed high school's annual income, that's a $10,000 leap. Wonderful. But that, I think, should be, in my opinion, and I'm hoping some people out here hear this, that's just the beginning. A $10,000 leap is great. And I think we need to realize that also reduces that person's need for benefits and assistance. That will lower how much subsidy they'll need. And that's prolific to an economy. But that's just phase one. So having this highly flexible competency-based system is wonderful, and it gets them to the diploma. But what the heck happens when they get it? You know, the $10,000 annual increase in potential earning power, that's terrific. The decrease in benefits, that's terrific. But let's think past it so we have a really appetizing, great thing that's drawing us, pulling us into making this a tangible reality. What if that same place handling that facet of education also could be responsible and have motivation, and I'll explain what I mean by that, and have the motivation to handle a post-high school career training? Why is that important? When you have a learner do the secondary completion, whatever structure you have in place to do that, if it's gone well, you've developed a really good bond. That team that's been helping them has developed a really good bond with that learner. And trust is paramount. And trust is built with time and rapport. You know, just proving that you as the provider can get done what you say you can get done, and vice versa for the student. They get done what they say that what needs to get done gets done too. when you built that bridge of trust and you tell the learner, oh, we're going to send you down to this place to do some career training because we know you want to, get into career or to counseling, or that you want to be an electrician, or whatever their next aspiration is. They're like, oh my God, I love this team, and this is my place, and I feel most comfortable here. We're shooing them off, and maybe we don't want to, but we're usually moving them on to the next organization. And it's another rapport building process for them to make that transition. And what if that next entity's policies are much different than yours, and the onboarding process is insanely hard? You're losing control as the initial organization that moved them to the point where they're at now. You're handing them off to a next place. And let's face it, those handoffs tend not to be frictionless. They tend to be very radical, or often they are. What if you were responsible for helping the student as an organization evolve and take that next step, and it was a seamless, frictionless process? What if you could do that? I can tell you, we have the good fortune of being able to do that. We owe a funding after our students finish, and we receive it by definitely working hard and putting proper constructs in place to do it. But we know when we can keep our pipeline running smooth and we're not handing our graduates off to another organization, that nucleus of production is so much tighter. That nucleus of production keeps that trust bridge intact. That learner doesn't need to get uncomfortable, reestablish rapport, do huge amounts of new paperwork, possibly be stopped at the gate by difficult processes like that. It's just one smooth continuum. But anybody who's ever taken workforce innovation funding of any type knows that doesn't come without, challenge, but it also doesn't come without measurement. You are measured. You are evaluated on performance. We have to get at least 60% of our individuals that join this post-diploma training a cert, a career certification. We have to get at least 60% of those individuals a job that pays $12 an hour or more. And obviously more is better. Or we don't have that funding to do that anymore. It's this type of continuum where we are incentivized, to help the student get the diploma in the most efficient route possible, because we are paid for performance, that we've had so much innovation with our systems. Now that we're tapping into the workforce funding, and we can help the learners that we've established rapport and trust with do job training to ultimately get a career, our nucleus of production is tight. But we are measured and held accountable to obtaining that result. And we're also funded for reaching those results at, an appropriate, fiscally sustainable level. But everybody, we own the entire pipe that takes them from a learner that doesn't have, when they first see us, their secondary education completed, to when they exit our program. And this is new for us, but when they exit their program, they can have their career cert and a job with the key term, some upward mobility. One agency, one school, we're doing the whole gamut of work. And yes, are there select individuals within our program that when they finish the secondary level of education with us, they should move on to the post-secondary level? Sure, certainly. Should there be some construct in place that not forces us, but incentivizes us, and I think that's key, that incentivizes us to make the pairing to help with a smooth and seamless handoff to that post-secondary institution? Most certainly, if that's appropriate. And I think that that's a different conversation. But we can't think so one-dimensionally. I got 10,000 people GEDs this year. Awesome. What did they do once they got it? Too often, and this was us up until this school year, too often it was anecdotal responses. 15 of our people came in, they said that they love where they're working now and they couldn't have done it without us. 10 other people said they're going to college now and they're having the greatest time of their life and they owe it all to us because we helped them finish their secondary education. That's outstanding. But oftentimes we're prohibited because of the way systems are set up from owning the entire continuum that we all know as people passionate about helping adults. We all know we should probably own this entire continuum. We built the initial trust. We need to see it all the way through. But we build these systems that don't allow it. Why? Why in the heck do we do this? It's crazy. It's only because of some of the things that I've seen with my own eyes that I've been privileged enough to be in a leadership position and involved with in the state of Ohio that I know when you do this different, when you own the adult education process from finishing secondary education through career training, through job placement, folks, you can make a monstrously profound impact on learners' lives. Adults' lives. You're going to be able to tangibly see a state economic impact. If our states can then structure funding, and it's going to probably be workforce funding, if they can structure funding that allows that adult to complete the secondary education, complete career training, and then for that same institution, whoever it is, it's a school, it's an agency of some type, that's providing this opportunity, this training continuum, if they can incentivize on a performance level, we're not talking about block grants, we're not talking about what ifs. This person attended 100 days, I captured them and I locked them into that chair from X time to Y time. No, we're talking about results. Did they recover credits if that's the way you're going to evaluate something? Did they pass a test of some type if that's the way you're going to evaluate something? Did they get a diploma? Which, of course, I think all of us know is a good measure. Can we structure funding to be released during those key events? Can we provide further funding when a student joins a post-diploma, a post-high school career training program? Can we reward when the student joins? Can we reward when the student earns that cert? And most importantly, can we reward when that student does get that job with upward mobility? And I know the state of Ohio, $12 an hour is a good start. I know in some states that may be a laugh and not even enough for a cup of coffee. But ultimately, can we, within the reasonableness of whatever makes sense in your state, build something that rewards people as the student progresses down that pipeline to a job under one roof? Under one roof. Can that be done? Can it be done right away? Do you already have a fragmented version of this with a lot of handoffs and complications that exist that simply needs to be untangled into a cleaner, smoother continuum? Do you? I bet to say you probably have something like this already. It's just not optimized. And the reason it's not optimized, if I'm going to just throw out a blind response, you're not incenting what you really want. You're not making it easy to incent what you really want. As a larger society, as America, don't we really want to set up people for, this is the land of opportunity? Do we not all, to some degree, that are serving people in some type of civil service, do we not all ultimately want to set people up for success in this land of opportunity? Seems reasonable that we do, but we make it awfully darn hard the way we do things sometimes to make that possible. We make it awfully hard. I think we need to think about how do we build ownership throughout the entire process for a school or an agency to take an adult that hasn't finished their secondary education, help them close that out, help them get into career training, and help them get into a job. And you have to incent each milestone when it's completed that provider of that service is rewarded for getting that adult to that level. I'm going to tell you, economies are going to be thriving at a much greater level. And you're going to get folks that would not otherwise be great economic contributors contributing at a high level. You're going to start breaking the generational poverty cycle too. Why? What was one of the motivations of our adults joining this program in the beginning? Not being a hypocrite. What in the heck? They want to show their friends, their family, their children, they're capable of learning. If they're going to tell you to go to school and get a good job or start a business, they're going to be a role model. They're going to practice what they preach. They're showing by example that they can do it. But I'm telling you, one of the key reasons they're not doing it now, we're making it too darn hard. We're giving too many individual specialist organizations too many fragmented roles in this. If we want to make it easy, make it easy. Guess what? One-stop shop. I know a lot of states have one-stop centers. And I'm not going to launch an opinion on that. But we need to make a center that gets the high school education for an adult, that gets them to that career training, gets them to that job, in that same place is the place. Because once you earn trust, it's hard to then restart and bring them back. Once you earn the trust, see them through the process. Because ultimately, that adult wants to be that positive role model for their friends, their family, their community. That's going to have a down the chain impact. If that adult's going to school, guess who else is going to school? Their child, their grandchild. When their child sees mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, graduate, career train, get a great job, they're waking up as a child every day to somebody that's going to work, that's going to school. That becomes the norm in that household. That becomes a situation where that child feels like, yeah, going to school, getting a job, creating a business, that's status quo. But again, we don't make it easy to do that right now. Or many states and many places in this country that is the land of opportunity, we make it hard for people to have the opportunities that they actually want. They don't want it bad enough. They do. We make it hard for them to get. We're smart. As a society, we're very smart. We have just teeming folks that innovate in every sector. This sector is poorly innovated, I think. Poorly iterated, poorly innovated. This can change. If I'm going to leave this presentation on one thought, it's this. Don't make doing what I'm saying harder than it has to be. This is a workforce project. This is an economic development project for your state. It's not that it's a breeze to do, but we can do it. Ohio has the model. And yes, it's one of 50 states. But if it's being done now, we can replicate anything to scale in seems like seconds, with the way our society is set up. But we're not replicating quick enough winners in this space. Let's do our society at large a favor and implement this continuum of adult education through career, adult education through tangible post-secondary handoff. Let's do it as a workforce project, knowing that our ROI, even if this isn't perfect to start, is so much higher than whatever nonsensical, fragmented, decentralized systems we've got in place now. We know even if this doesn't work in maybe the utopian way I've painted it to a T, certainly a lot better than what we've got in place now. Orders of magnitude better. Orders of magnitude more efficient and effective, and just darn near, or just a whole heck of a lot more logical. When it makes sense and it's clear cut, probably is the best solution. Don't overthink it. I want to help be a change agent, and I don't really like that word that much because I feel like it's misused quite a bit. But I want to be a change agent and help all 50 of our states, and hopefully beyond. I'm sure that there's other places in this broad world that need this too. But I want to bring this solution that I've discussed everywhere. I hope that the right people that have the decision-making power in the states that will be hearing this talk, I hope that they allow themselves to be open to this type of solution. I can tell you it can be implemented quickly if you're in the mindset of making changes that are going to positively impact your state, your communities. So with that said, there's a lot of thinking to be done, and there's a lot of positive change we all need to be a part of. Will you step up? Will you be part of that change? I guess only time will tell. Thank you.